and welcome to Just One More Cookie, a podcast about two sisters' journeys toward complete health and wellness. We definitely don't have it all figured out, and we're still in the thick of it, but we are enjoying the ride. We'd love for you to come and join us for just one more cookie. Hi friends, welcome to another episode of Just One More Cookie. Thank you so much for joining us for yet another episode. As always, we want to encourage you, if you are watching us on YouTube, please subscribe, hit the like button, share the video with your friends, your family. If you're listening to us on a podcast platform like Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please, if you could, leave us a review and also share us with your friends and family. We are so excited about growing our community and getting some really great feedback as we're doing it. We're so excited. We also have an email address, one more cookie, PODpod@gmail.com. This week, we are having another special guest. We're not going to tell you who it is yet. Surprise guest. They will be coming on later in the episode to share their own story, and we're going to end out with them. So we're going to start with just me and Ab, and we're going to talk a little bit about the impact of this week's topic. So we are talking about healing family relationships. And one of the things that we were talking about as we were just discussing this topic in general is that it's not really a topic you talk about a lot, because I feel like so many people grow up with the idea of you keep family secrets within the family. Don't share the secrets, right? Because the important part is that when you go out in public, people got to believe that you have it together. They have to believe that everything that's going on at home, nothing is wrong. And we spend so much of our lives dressing it up. And what's going on the inside of a lot of our homes can be a lot of trauma. And it doesn't even have to necessarily be intense trauma. It can be a lot going on internally that we're just not addressing. And we believe, and research shows, that living such a life where you are keeping a lot in and keeping it secret and not dealing with your emotions and not dealing with your pain and trauma, it's not just impacting you from an emotional standpoint, that this is a holistic issue, that it can impact your physical body. And I know that this sounds so weird as we keep talking about health topics. It's so interesting to me, and Ab, you can chime in, like, how much this is intersecting with like mental health, and how many people out there might be struggling physically or dealing with illnesses that are like trying to treat them physically, but really it's so much more on the mental side.
Right. I think that we, of course, when we're talking about health, a lot of times the most obvious is our physical health, our diet, diabetes, high blood pressure, what we're eating, how we're exercising. And what we fail to realize is that we are a whole person. So my physical body is not the only part of me. I am also an emotional being. I am a spiritual being. I have, a mental, all of the mental, physiological, psychological, everything is all intertwined together. So when we talk about our health, we can't just focus on one thing, because one thing affects another, as we're going to learn. So, I mean, I think that this topic is so important because we don't understand the long-term effects and how much it is impacting our whole body, how much our mental state is, our mental sickness is infecting our physical sickness and our physical bodies. So I'm excited to talk about this because I know that a lot of times it's not addressed because, like you say, this is one of those things we don't want anybody to hear about. It's so easy to talk about the physical because the physical is very visible, So that's why I feel like, and I think I've said this before, that it's so unfair when you're dealing with a weight problem because everybody has issues. Everybody has emotional issues. Everybody has mental issues. Everybody has past trauma. But if you're overweight, your trauma, your issues are on display for the world to see. So today we're going to talk about something that is not on display, but it's something that everybody has to deal with.
Yeah. And I feel like it's something that we may avoid, because sometimes I think this mentality of, why would I go back to something that hurt me? Why
Mhm.
would I revisit, even when I work with clients and we're talking about going back to their story, especially like traumatic parts of their story? And it's, why would I go back there? Well, you go back there because that's the place of healing. The place of
Mhm.
healing is in your pain. The place of healing is in even acknowledging your pain. And a lot of people don't want to acknowledge their pain, because on the other side of acknowledging pain is the person who hurt us. But as we're going to talk about, really healing is more about you than it ever is going to be about another person. They become secondary to the narrative of your healing. So when we were doing some research on this, and how holding on to anger, holding on to hurt can really cause physical effects in your body, came across this term called embitterment. And embitterment, obviously part of the word bitter, is an emotional state of feeling let down and unable to do anything about it. And it's different from anger because it also involves a feeling of helplessness to change things. So there was a psychiatrist, his name was Michael Linden. He believed and proposed that bitterness should actually be a psychological disorder, which I think is so crazy, but
Mhm.
so true, right? Because of all the things that stem from bitterness. So he termed it post-traumatic embitterment disorder, which is PTED, and he kind of compared it to PTSD. But he said PTSD, which we all know is post-traumatic stress disorder, is more focused on fear, and PTED, there's a whole other list under that when it comes to diagnosing it.
Mhm. Right. As I was looking at that, I thought, wow, it's like a mental illness. And then I thought, this is so true, because how many times have we come across people and you can just tell by talking to them, like, that is such a bitter individual. It just seeps out of them. And to have it actually classified, I was like, wow, that is crazy. But yeah, so when he was talking about this in this article, he said that there are certain criteria that need to be met before you can actually be diagnosed with this illness. So, first, it's going to be a single exceptional life event that triggers it, which is similar to PTSD. So, basically, there's trauma. The negative psychological state of the sufferer developed because of the event. So, there was some negative impacts from that trauma. The emotions experienced are embitterment and feelings of injustice. So I know me, I have a hard time with injustice. I think that's part of my personality. I want everything to be fair and I want everything to be just. So for this is something I struggle with for sure. The sufferer repeatedly remembers the event. So it's something that, and I know a lot of us can think about this, especially a traumatic event or things that hurt us or people that hurt us. A lot of times we think about it constantly. Like, how dare they do that? Or if I had gotten in this conversation, again, if I could replay it, I would say this and this and this. And I would say, how dare you? And then I would have a list, but it's like you're replaying it over and over in your head. There are no other diagnoses that match what the sufferer is experiencing. So basically, they've ruled everything else out. And then it's been going on for at least 3 months. So if all of that can be classified, you can actually be technically diagnosed, which we're not diagnosing anybody because we're not any sort of medical professional. But according to Michael Linden, these criteria, once they are met, you can fall under that umbrella of PTED.
I was reading this book about, it was really diving deep into brain activity. And one thing that he said that I thought was really interesting is that the brain doesn't know the difference between reality and between just your thoughts. So he said, when you are consistently replaying events in your brain doesn't your brain doesn't view those as essentially memories. Your brain is replaying it as if it's in that moment, which is why he said
Wow.
you can replay an event in your mind. And he said that your body, like your heart will get like racing, like you'll start sweating.
Yeah, you
Because
can
he's,
feel sick to your stomach and
yeah,
angry all over again, like
I
you're actually having that fight again. Yeah.
exactly. So he said that the brain, what you're doing is you're making your brain consistently live in that moment, which connects to when I was working at a a lockdown facility for troubled youth. We had a psychologist come in one time, and he was giving us a lecture, and he said, I want you to see the kids that you are teaching. And because we had from ages 12 to 18, he said, in front of you are physical children who are in their teens, right? He said, but I want you to understand that those are 6 and 7-year-olds. He said, because what happens is, and this is connected to your brain, what happens is that when you experience a level of trauma and you don't deal with it, you will stunt yourself emotionally, because it's like you've kept your brain in that situation and you keep going back over and over again. So you physically have moved on from it, but emotionally you are stuck. You are stuck at that situation. You are stuck in that moment until you start to deal with it. So even when we're talking about PTED, there are some similarities between that and PTSD. So feelings of helplessness, blaming yourself, feeling edgy and aggressive, sleep troubles, appetite change, reduced libido, lowered motivation, phobias around revisiting the places that remind you of the event. And you know what this reminds me of? Remember Princess Bride? And that one guy.
You're a really big fan of Princess Bride. This is the second
I
time you've referenced it.
I don't know why Princess Bride keeps coming up. But you remember, what was his name? Inigo Montoya.
Inigo Montoya.
And he had lived his life trying to avenge his death. And he had memorized it. Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. You killed my father.
Prepare to die.
And it's like he had dedicated it, like his very being, to vindicating that, to like that anger was so ripe within him. And I think all of these examples, right, are, if I could narrow all these examples down, it would be your life has been kidnapped by your anger. Because now you can't sleep. Your appetite, like you can't eat, like everything about your life becomes this moment. And you, like, instead of living, you are now being held captive by your anger and bitterness.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Another thing. So PTSD, I know that's a very well-known common illness, especially it's come more to light in the past recent years, but it actually sets off constant panic reactions. So that's going to leave you like on a high alert. So it's more, panic attacks, fear-based, whereas PTED, it's not caused by this constant fear, but it's more a state of fury, helplessness, embitterment. So basically you're in this constant state of anger, and I'm just furious all the time. I'm just, that constant stress of being mad, I think. So it's similar, but different. You can kind of see the ways that it ties in with PTSD.
There's a lot of long-term effects of bitterness. So it can affect your metabolism, your immune response, or your organ function. It can impact the development in the course of cardiovascular disease. It can cause chronic headache. It can also evoke stress response, which is the fight or flight, which naturally happens in all of us when stress comes upon us. But the only difference here is that your body never checks out of that state. So you're always in the fight or flight mode.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And this is so fascinating when we talked about at the beginning, how our bodies are not just, they're not separated by, physical, mental, emotional. This is proof right there that with us not dealing with these emotions and with this disease, we're affecting the rest of our body, and we can affect it to the point that actually it affects our longevity. So they had this study that they did. So they had this group of nuns in 1930. They instructed them to basically write about their life and kind of journal about their life. And then they went back 60 years later and they checked up on these nuns, and those that had written positive things about their life, about, things that had happened to them, and they were positive, they had a good outlook. They actually lived up to 10 years longer than those who were angry and just dealt on the negative. So, I mean, obviously we're not just focusing on that. And like we said, it's not one or the other. So we can't just say, okay, well, if you have a good outlook and you're not bitter and you forgive everyone, and you're happy, you're going to live longer. So, but I mean, you have to also eat healthy and exercise. So we can't just say, well, you can have this Big Mac, but afterwards do some positive affirmations and you'll feel better and then you'll live longer. So, but this is a huge thing when you think about it and put it in perspective. Just dealing with this, you can potentially increase your longevity by up to 10 years if you're living that same healthy lifestyle. If you add this on top of it and get rid of all of this negativity and all of this bitterness and anger and unforgiveness that you have, it can really impact your life.
Yeah, and long term, it can also change your personality and your self image. And the thing that happens specifically with your self image is that it can go from being very competent and purpose driven to shifting to becoming a helpless victim. And the thing that I find interesting is what we are putting out, we tend to attract back to us. So if we believe that people are out to hurt us because we've been hurt and we haven't dealt with that, then we're going to attract people into our life who are going to hurt us. If we believe that people have ill intentions for us, so we're very combative, we are going to continue to be combative and attract those types of people into our lives. So I think that there's validity here with the idea of that it can shift how you interact with the world and then how the world interacts with you.
Mm-hmm. Right. Bitterness and unforgiveness and all of these undealt with relationships and emotions, it can also elevate your cynicism and your paranoia. So basically, you become self-protective, you avoid opportunities and relationships that could be fulfilling. I know me personally, I have experienced this in my own life, especially when I was younger, just because people had hurt me and it broke my heart. And then I became a shell of myself. I put up so much protection, so many barriers between me and others because I didn't want to get hurt again, because I was still hurt I hadn't dealt with it. I was still angry. And because of that, I kept people at arm's length because I didn't want to give somebody else that opportunity to hurt me again. So if it's not dealt with, it can allow you to become very cynical about the rest of the world. And, everybody's just, you can't trust anybody. People are garbage. Everybody is just out to hurt me. What are their motives? What are their intentions? All of that kind of negativity can creep in.
Yeah, and we kind of talked about this already about like how it stops the clock of your life, especially emotionally. But I think one of the things that's interesting is that it makes it almost impossible for you to live in the moment, right? Because everything that's coming up that is present, you are connecting to your past. And I know this is something that I talk to my therapist about a lot, is learning how to trust people that are currently in my life and not hold them to the standard or the script of my hurt from the past. So if you're my friend right now, I want to be in the moment and be friends with you and value you without me thinking, okay, but I had friends in the past and they did this to me and they did this to me and you're doing this to me. Oh, this is similar, cut you off. And when you live your life like that and you don't let those things go and let those things heal, what you can do is miss opportunities, like you're saying, in relationships, or just enjoying the moment and enjoying life in the here and now.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and there's been studies done about mindfulness and being present and showing how that really affects your happiness level and makes you more content. And if you're constantly dealing with the past and dwelling on it, you can't be mindful. You can't notice the beauty that's around you. Another thing that it does is it just really wastes your time and your energy because you're constantly focused on it. You're constantly replaying the event in your head, and your time and your energy are a huge resource that you are wasting. And a lot of times it is a more important resource than what was taken from you from this relationship or this trauma or this hurt. And honestly, if you waste your time and your energy, you can't get it back. So for us to keep dwelling on that, we are giving our power over to this event and replaying it and letting it control us. And we're giving all of these time and energy resources to something that is sucking the life out of us.
Yeah. And I think I remember a quote that says, bitterness or holding bitterness against someone is like letting them live in your head rent free, which I think is so true. Like when I think about how much of my time was wasted on thinking about somebody else, and I think, okay, but they're probably not thinking about me. Like they're
Mhm.
living their life and I'm over here stewing over them and they're probably just living their life happy. Um, which I think also can affect your current relationships because bitter people are unpleasant people to be around. You know, I
Mhm.
know with specific times in my life when I struggled with anger and bitterness and was really distant, I was either um, one of those brash, like just angry all the time, or just very distant and like sneaky. Like the way that I dealt with anger and bitterness came out differently. But in all of those cases, I didn't have good relationships with people. And I didn't believe that I was a good person to be in a relationship with just because of my mental state.
Mhm. Right. So I think it's important to recognize why it is that we cling to this because it becomes as we all know because nobody is immune to this because everybody experiences trauma and hurt. I think it's important to recognize why we can't let it go and why we cling to this. So, one of the things that they mentioned in this article is that it can give you a sense of purpose, even though this is negative. But I think a lot of times, because we don't want to work on ourselves, we focus on this other person or this event. And it's kind of almost like it can become our mission. Like, okay, I'm going to destroy this person. So I am going to go and I am going to spread my bitterness to other people and say, this person was really terrible. You shouldn't talk to them. They're a garbage individual. Did you hear what they did? It almost becomes like our purpose in life. I'm going to destroy that person because they destroyed me. Or just it allows you to take your focus off of yourself and put it onto that other person. So then it almost feels like, okay, I fulfilling a purpose, but really it's deceiving because you're not. I mean, it's a negative thing that we can associate and think, oh, this is, I've got purpose in my life. I'm going to destroy this other person.
Yeah. And I feel like it can be used to hide from the fear of life changing or from you failing. I know like if I always use the hurt that people have done to me, I can say, well, that's why I'm not taking risks. That's why I'm not making this decision because I was hurt, you know?
Right. I think also we also cling to it just because if we do that, then we can avoid taking responsibility for the path that our life has taken. And so basically, we wanted our life to go differently, but we can go back and blame the other person, or because I experienced trauma, I wasn't able to do this in my life, or, I'm not happy because this happened to me. So it almost is like it takes the responsibility away from me, so I don't have to blame myself. I can blame the other person. It's just easier that way instead of looking inward and saying, okay, this happened to me. I wanted my life to go in this direction, so I'm going to work to do that. It's easier to just say, okay, well, it's everybody else's fault.
And that's the big one, right? I think this one is the biggest one. I want to cling to it, never have to deal with myself when it's
Mhm.
about somebody else. When somebody else hurt me and I can just stay there, I'll never have to go within and say, what was it about me that caused that level of hurt? What was my role? And even if I didn't have a role in the hurt, what is my responsibility to how I responded to the hurt and at where I'm at right now? Because a lot of things, especially if it's from childhood, there's some that like you were literally just an innocent bystander, that this was done to you and you can't change that. But can I go back and say, what can I learn about me and what can I take responsibility for in my response to it, which I think is a more empowering place than just saying it happened to me and it's about everybody else. So, what we wanted to do today to take you to the second half of this is we wanted to take you into our world a little bit. So, we're going to get a little vulnerable with you about our own experiences with hurt and how we dealt with them. We're getting ready to introduce our guest. But before we do that, me and Abga wanted to make something very clear that we grew up in a home that was loving, that we have and had. Our dad passed away, but our mom Some of the most phenomenal parents on the planet, and we want to make sure that we honor them. But we also are going to talk about the fact that we were raised by humans and we're human, and some of the things that we dealt with because of it. And the most beautiful part is that this is not the first place where we're advertising this, that our family as a whole and as singular individuals have gone through some really amazing healing experiences that we think would be of value to share. And we do this on a very public platform because we want to empower you to do the same thing, because you're only as sick as your secrets. And for us, healing began because we were willing to be honest and vulnerable with each other. So we want to take you on a little bit of journey of our vulnerability. So we hope you enjoy it. Okay, now, as we said from the beginning, we have a very special guest that we did not reveal until now, our baby brother, Aaron.
What is with that ominous sigh?
You are our baby, though.
I know. I get it. Continue.
But we are so excited to have him on today. And interesting note, it's edited out of this episode. This is a review. We spent the last 15 minutes arguing. So we just wanted to know. Actually, Aaron was more of a bystander.
I was watching. It was entertaining.
Yes.
Well, I mean, it wasn't
very
an
nostalgic.
argument.
It was nostalgic back to our childhood.
It was a discussion. It was not back to our childhood at all.
Not at all.
Well, okay, yes, that's fair.
But it was just a discussion.
A disagreement / discussion. But just so you know, as we're like dialoguing through all this, because the main thing that we want to talk about is our experiences with our hurt growing up. Because of course we're talking about family relationships. And I know for me, like my most hurtful relationships and where I've experienced the most hurt has been within my family. And I know that you two can say the same. So we're going to be talking about some of the hurt that we experienced growing up and the ways that we healed. But we also want you to know that it's not a perfect science. And we still argue and we still hurt each other's feelings, and we still have to have difficult conversations and restart after a 16-minute argument on our podcast. So
it wasn't that long.
Well, that's what the timer says.
We weren't arguing that entire time.
Let's not argue about how long we're arguing.
Thank you, Aaron. Aaron will keep us on track. So we are going to start. Aaron, we're going to start with you because Aaron is more so the neutral party at this point. So Aaron's going to start by just kind of telling us about your journey with hurt, and we'll kind of chime in and tell our own stories as well.
All right. Well, to start from the very beginning, we grew up in what I would call a tumultuous household. It's not that we didn't love each other. We were a very loving family. We got along for 90% of the time, but I feel like
I would dispute that percentage, but
I would say 50 is probably
okay. Whatever the percentage is, I just feel like the main issue in my mind was always that the solution to everything was yelling. And by solution, I mean just what we fell into. You know, we're punching each other in the face in the backseat of the car, mom and dad, or mom yelling, "Stop doing that. Get your hands off your sister. Stop putting your finger in your brother's nose." So, and it was just always like that. I look back and I cannot believe that mom took us in public. Like it's absurd to think about how just
that's so embarrassing.
How unashamed to fight in public we were.
Yeah.
And the only
Although
time,
I feel like when I got older that I got more embarrassed, but I was embarrassed of everything. So, but yeah, it was embarrassing. I don't know. I think to your point, saying that it was a tumultuous, I don't know if we knew that consciously.
Yeah.
It just seemed normal.
Yeah, it was normal.
Well, and the only time we wouldn't get yelled at is in the middle of church, where she would whisper yell, which if you don't know what a whisper yell is, so she would just stop it.
Or get out her nails, her claws.
Yeah.
Well, let's not talk about that in case, they want to bring charges against her because of the mark she would leave on my arm. Sorry, Mom. But anyway, in all seriousness, it put me on a track growing up that I did not know how to let anything out, especially anger. And when things wouldn't go my way, I wouldn't know that I could talk to someone or that I could let my anger out at all. And emotions like that are going to manifest themselves in some sort of way. And to me, I was a very angry child, teenager, young adult. I would hit walls. I put holes in my doors, drove my mom insane. I actually pushed Amy into a wall and broke the drywall one time. And did we have to pay? We had to pay for someone to come and spackle it.
Yeah.
And, or my grandpa or our grandpa would have to come fix it. And let me tell you, did not make him happy to have to come do that.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, that was my outlet. And when I started to get into my later teens, there was a lot of other things. Like I listened to very, very heavy metal music because the tone of heavy metal music is very, very angry. And I felt like in some small way, if I heard very angry music, that somehow it was releasing my anger, but it wasn't at all. And I just feel like the culture of yelling that had manifested itself in our household kind of set the tone for how we thought we were supposed to deal with our emotions instead of just trying to find healthy ways to deal with them.
Mm-hmm. I don't want to put you on blast, but I remember 2 specific times when me and you got in an argument and you punched me in the arm. And mind you, it hurt really bad, but I started bawling. I cried so hard, and it wasn't because my arm hurt. I mean, it did hurt, but I could feel like the hatred coming off of you. And it was like, it scared me almost, and it devastated me. I'm like, how can he hate me so much? And I know I feel like me and Amy, we displayed our emotions or dealt with them differently. And I know your main one, it was obvious, like you said, we knew that you were really angry.
Yeah, I know for me, like I used humor and sarcasm to survive that environment. Like mine was a little bit different. So I always tried to minimize everything, and like you said, Aaron, like I remember when Dad would come home, and he was an entrepreneur. He worked all the time, but when he would come home, I remember my whole body would tense up because it was like knowing when he came home that him and Mom were going to start fussing. And then that like yelling at each other was then going to trickle down to us yelling at each other. And then like, I hated holidays. I hated Thanksgiving. I hated Christmas because at some point there was going to be a blow up. And every year, it didn't matter what happened. At some point there was going to be screaming, slamming doors. Someone was going to start crying. And it was like having all of us in the same room. Like literally, like my whole body was so nervous because I was like, oh, someone's about to blow. It was like a ticking time bomb at all times. Who's about to blow? Who's about to do it? So it's like when I left that environment, I would try to be really sarcastic and really like the funny girl. So I never had to tap into those emotions. And I don't think that it was until our parents separated, and it was like around 2008. And I remember like them separating and like like taking a chaotic environment and then putting that chaotic environment on steroids. It was like all the things that we had like shoved down and like we all had our own coping mechanisms. I felt like at that point exploded. And it was like all the things that were not addressed and all the emotions that we didn't know how to process. You were processing it through anger. I was processing it through sarcasm and humor, which wasn't really a processing. It was just an avoidance tactic. It was like at that moment, it exploded. And it was like, I looked around and I was like, what is this? We are like on the outside, we look great, you know, like going to church and all of us were involved and did really great in school. Like we were on the right track. So it was like when people found out that our parents were getting a divorce, it was like huge, like what? But from our standpoint, I was like 15 years too late. And I mean, that might sound
I was relieved, and that's going to sound terrible, but I thought when it happened, I was like, thank God I can't handle this anymore. I would carry like, you could feel the weight of the stress all the time.
Yeah. And I think it was from their standpoint too. I feel like all of us had these coping mechanisms for how we dealt with our emotions, but none of the coping mechanisms helped us deal with our emotions. So it was like from our parents down, it was like on a consistent basis. So it was like that traumatic event was like this turning point for me. But the turning point was just me being so angry. I was angry at everything. I was angry at dad. I was angry at mom. I couldn't stand you two. I was angry at I was angry like even with the church I was going to. I was angry with all of them. I was angry like I like spewed anger because it was like for the first time in my life I couldn't laugh this off. I couldn't joke it off. I couldn't minimize it. And even when I felt like I was being pressured to minimize it, right? Like let's just move on and forgive. And I didn't want to forgive because I was like, I don't want this. Like this environment that we've grown up in, I can't do it anymore. And I wanted to stay in that hate, and I did for years.
Yeah, I don't think that I had. Well, I don't know if I had anger really. I mean, I guess I did. Mine didn't really manifest like that. I mean, I feel like I had a little bit of both of yours. I know that I for sure did a lot of the sarcasm. In fact, I know that was a part of a really damaging aspect of me and Aaron's relationship. I know, especially, and we just fixed that. Like, I don't even know how many years ago. It's not been very long. And that's how we would interact with each other all the time. And it's like oh, just kidding, joking, which really you're saying just really mean things to each other. And it's like, oh, psych, just kidding. But really, I mean, you're being horrible and you're letting out anger. So I would do that. I'd be really sarcastic. I think a lot of the ways that I dealt with all of the chaos, I just very much withdrew into myself. I became very anxious. I didn't want to be around other people unless I had my family, somebody from my family with me, especially you, Amy, because I felt like you were the security blanket because you would take away all the attention because you're, in the spotlight a lot. So if the attention was on you, it wouldn't be on me. I just remember I would have panic attacks. I remember, and I didn't even associate this with anything until probably yesterday. I was like, I think I was having panic attacks and I think it was because of this. And I remember we would go out to eat and I would ask mom if she would order my meal for me and she wouldn't. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And she thought I was just being so stupid, like I didn't want to. What she didn't understand and what I didn't understand and know how to tell her is that I was so terrified to talk to strangers, to talk to anybody. And just me putting in an order and saying, I would like a grilled cheese with French fries and a Sprite, please, terrified me. Like I would get sweaty hands. I would get sick to my stomach. And that's it. And she wouldn't do it because of course I can't tell her, Mom, I'm having an anxiety attack. Can you please place my order for me? But that's how I processed it. And it was just so much. I had that same feeling that you did, Amy, when dad would come home. It was, if I turned down the street and his car would be there, I'm like, oh, here we go. It was just, and I feel like we didn't deal with it because we didn't know anything was wrong because that was our environment that we were raised in. We thought everybody screamed at each other. And it was I think it was Thanksgiving. I don't remember when all of the stuff with him happened when he actually left, but I want to say our first holiday was Thanksgiving maybe.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember when he wasn't there and I came in and I'm like, is this how all families have Thanksgiving? no one yells at each other. No one throws anything. Their mothers don't scream. And, it's just, it was crazy. And I feel like now, after we've done all of this healing, I feel like that's why my home is such a sacred place for me, and why I will never allow somebody or anything to come into my house to cause that chaos again, because I remember it was traumatizing. It is ingrained and written on my brain of it was complete turmoil. And I could never, ever imagine myself going back to that kind of situation again.
Yeah. And I feel like, it was interesting because that Thanksgiving, mom nor dad was there. Like you could, like me and you cooked. And then I remember Aaron came home later and I think he ate with us, but it was just us. I think that was and I agree. It was like, it was so crazy how peaceful it was. But I think too, like the thing that was so beneficial about our family trauma, because I believe that our story is not different than a lot of people's stories, because I think what happens within families is that they focus so much on what is seen on the outside, right? Like how they present, like when you're in public, you better get it together, like make sure that you look the part, right? And it was like, we looked the part. We looked the part of a really happy family. And like, we looked the part of being somewhat successful. But it was like underneath were like all of these toxic behaviors. And even like you said, Abigail, the way that we talk to each other, like the way that I communicated with you and the way I communicated with Aaron, it was sarcastic. It was like you would like cut each other. You would say, just rude things. And because all three of us are so verbal, we would know. We would know how to cut each other deep. And it's like you walk away just shrugging, like that's just how we communicated with each other. But
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but to that point, to talk about a sarcastic point, which I will tell. So I'm going to tell an Aaron story, which this was really
another Aaron story.
Well, when it comes to sarcasm, you're really good. I mean, like I said, I can't remember. I can't remember the last time that we've been mean sarcastic to each other. But so here's an example. And this one is funny, but at the same time, it was really mean. So one time we were eating dinner. Actually, I think it might have just been me and Aaron. I don't know if I told you the story, Amy. So I was eating something and I had like a piece of food by the corner of my mouth. So Aaron looks at me, he's like, "You look disgusting. And you have food on your face." Which I can laugh about it because it was funny. But that was the kind of stuff that we would say to each other. So it's, that guise of we're being funny, but at the same time, not protecting that person that you say that you're going to love. Because really, I feel like that's my responsibility. You guys are my family. So I wouldn't let somebody else talk to you like that because it's my job to protect you. So I can't do that either because I can't let somebody know, we have free reign to talk to them like that because she does. And I feel like we had to really break that cycle because it was so ingrained in us. That's how we talk to each other all the time.
Yeah. And I feel like really knowing each other, like, because I was so, I didn't care, apathetic about my relationship with both of you. It's like, I didn't care that Abigail was sensitive because Abigail's always been probably the most sensitive out of the three of us. And if it was like a day that I didn't care and I wanted to hurt her feelings, me and Aaron would go at her, or understanding that Aaron is quite sensitive as well, and it's like, if I knew that
you're very sensitive, Aaron.
You are. If I wanted to get under his skin, it's like saying certain things, I would know that it would upset him,
Dude, nobody on this earth knows how to get under my skin better than Amy. Not one person.
She's really good at it.
One person on this earth knows it better.
I know. And I'd be like, I would say something to him, and then all of a sudden we'd be fighting, and I'm like, wait, how did this happen? Where did this come from?
I've had some of those experiences as well.
Like it's bringing up like my temper a little bit just thinking about it. Like, what do you mean? What are you trying to say?
Yeah, I've been caught off guard by that a couple of times too. I'll say something and then there's an explosion. I'm like, what just happened?
Yeah, right.
Did a volcano just explode? Was I like Did I black out and something happened? I don't know.
Yeah, but I think the difference here is that we're all three of us are still relatively the same person. I mean, we've definitely mellowed out a lot, but there's still cores of our personality. Like I know that I probably irritate the two of you the most out of anyone in your life. I just have that sort of personality, you know. But I think the difference is on the healing journey is self-awareness of yourself and then how you deal with other people. And maybe we can shift into the healing portion of it, like how understanding the environment that we grew up in, the things that we experienced and the way that we were dealing with our hurt. What did healing look like for you?
I would say that it started, unfortunately, when Dad was in his coma right before he died. And the thing that hit me the hardest and still is difficult to think about is that he actually called me a week beforehand and before he got in his accident. And I clicked off the call. I ignored it and I said, I'll call him back later. And I forgot to call him back. And the next thing I hear about him is he got into his accident. So I'm sitting at his bedside and he is in his coma and it's obviously not looking good. And I'm just sitting there holding his hand and just talking through, I forgive you. I hope you forgive me. All of these things. And I walked out of there, obviously a wreck. But I got in my car and I said, I cannot live like this anymore. That man might die, which he did, without me being able to have that conversation with him. I'll never be able to have that conversation with him. And I refuse to ever let that happen again, to where when I am able to talk to someone, and whether I'm the one who hurt them or they're the one who hurt me, whatever, I am perfectly capable of going to that person and saying, listen, we need to talk this out because I don't want to hold this against you. It's silly. I don't want you to be something else that I regret because I couldn't just humble myself to come to you and say, I'm sorry, or, hey, you hurt me and I would like to talk about it.
I think mom and dad's divorce hit me in such a different way because it like shined a light on how I really felt. And I realized how much anger I had towards dad and towards mom. So once I realized that, and I was really comfortable in my anger feels good, right? Especially when someone hurts you. I just wanted to stay angry. And it didn't matter how many conversations I had with dad. At the end of it, I was like, but I'm still mad. But I remember this was at the old house and I was sitting on the patio swing with mom. And I remember we were talking about something and I was angry at everything. It didn't matter what you brought up. I was disgusted, whatever it was. They're stupid. The world is, like it just seeped from me, like from my pores. I was angry. And I remember mom looked at me and she said, you are so angry. And she said, and maybe you have a right to be angry, but if you hold on to it, it'll change the person you are. She was like, even when I look into your eyes, this isn't Amy. And for some reason that had such an impact on me because I didn't feel like myself. I felt like a different version of me. And I didn't change immediately. It wasn't like, the next day I was like, I forgive everyone and everything's back to normal. It was just this idea of the things that hurt me the most. I knew that I was going to have to deal with them. But it was the thought of dealing with them that scared me, because dealing with them meant I was going to have to be honest on so many different levels. Even I remember one time, it was like a year and a half after that, and I was living in Tennessee at the time. So it was like out of sight, out of mind. I didn't have to deal with it. Didn't have to think about it. It still impacted me, but I didn't have to think about it. And I remember at my gym, they were offering like free therapy sessions. It was so weird. And it was the first time I ever talked to a therapist. And I remember we were sitting down and she started asking me about my family. And I started talking to her about dad. And while I was talking, she paused and she said, "It's not anger." She said, "It sounds like you're very hurt." And it was like something about that word sounded so much more impactful than anger. Like something about hurt made me feel more vulnerable and it made me feel more exposed. Whereas anger, I felt righteous in that. I felt like I'm right. But when she said hurt, it opened something up inside of me. And it was like that vulnerability. And it was like, I walked back to my car and like bawled my eyes out because I was thinking, I am hurt. Because I'm thinking about the little girl that was like 7 years old crying, begging dad to stay home. Or like when I was 4 years old, remembering like blowout arguments between mom and dad, like scared, like my parents are going to get a divorce. At 4 years old, stressed, or feeling like I was alone. Like I was a part of a family, but not really a part of a family. My family was broken and like none of us knew what was going on. And like, it was chaos. So it was little things like that along my journey that started breaking me down slowly and pushing me to start working through a lot of the anger and a lot of the hurt and being truthful. Like that's been the key in all of my journey, is identifying the truth and then saying the truth out of my mouth, which is why this conversation is so important to me, because this conversation people don't have. Because this conversation is hard. It's easy for us three to sit on, like, give us a topic to argue about. Listen, 3-part podcast. But tell us to sit down with each other and talk about each other's feelings. It's gotten so much easier. Like we've practiced it. But it is a practice because it's easier to sit and yell at each other and point fingers and say, well, Aaron, the reason why you're offended at me is because you're soft. And Abigail, the reason why you are you get upset because you're insecure. That's easy, right?
Like, I'm so mad at you. I know you're joking, but I'm still so mad at you. You just called me soft. Like, I want to fight that.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean it. But it's for real. That's easier as opposed to me sitting down and looking at myself and saying, the reason why I talk to them like that is because in that instance, maybe there was something I needed to say on a more vulnerable level, but it's easier for me to be joking and hurt your feelings than it is for me to say, Aaron, sometimes when you talk to me that way, it hurts me. That's a harder conversation because now I'm vulnerable. Now I'm letting you in and I'm giving you an opportunity to hurt me. And for me, growing up, I used as much armor as I could so you couldn't hurt me. But at the same time, I wasn't connecting to anybody. So being angry and being upset and being bitter was the loneliest place I have ever been. And I never want to go back there.
I think my process, because you did say that yours was a slow process, and I agree. And I think that's necessary. That's how it has to be. It's not going to be an overnight thing where I wake up and I've forgiven everybody and now I'm good. So with me, I think I don't really even know if there was an exact, I could pinpoint it and say, this is what helped me to heal. I think the major part of it was being alone. And I think that a lot of times people are afraid to be alone. And I was afraid to be alone as well. It just happened. Circumstances in my life came. I became really dependent on you. I became really dependent on Drea. And it was almost like God took you all away and made you move away and left me all alone, which I still mess with you both to this day about that. But I think that and the reason I did that, the reason I clung to those relationships is because I love very hard. I'm a very loyal person, and I have very few people that I bring into my circle, because when I do bring those people in, I am 100% real with them. I trust them with my heart. And so I had so much experiences of hurt. I was feeling so insecure that I couldn't allow anybody else in. So I trusted you, I trusted Drea, and that was it. And I couldn't find my identity outside the two of you because I was so scared. So when you guys left, it was almost like all of a sudden my armor is gone and I was very vulnerable. So to try to learn, it was almost like everything else was taken out of the picture. So all I had was me. So then I had to take a really good hard look at me. And in the beginning, I did not like that person at all. And it was a process of, first of all, looking at that person and saying, I don't like this person, but why is that? Are there some things that I need to change? Or are there some things that I just need to learn to love? Because the parts of me that I need to love are not like other people. So I'm not going to look like somebody else. I'm not going to feel like somebody else. And I shouldn't measure myself by other people. And I think the process of what really helped me to heal was learning how to love myself, because I never did. I never loved myself at all. I pretty much disliked myself pretty severely. I won't say hate because I don't think I hated myself, but I disliked myself a lot. And you cannot love other people until you learn how to love yourself. So I think that part of the journey for me was the most important, was truly learning who Abigail is and being okay with her and loving her and finding all of the really amazing things about her. And then finding the things that are not so great that maybe I just say, you know, those are my flaws and that's just how it's going to be. Or, you know, that's something I really need to address and I need to change because I could do better. So I think for me, being alone and in isolation, and I know a lot of people are scared of that, but being alone is not always a bad thing. And sometimes it's necessary. And some people, they never will because they can't. They have to have, that's why some people will be in damaging relationships forever, because they can't be alone because they have to have this really horrible person with them. But that was just part of my journey. And I think that was really what brought me forward. It really helped to heal me, was getting by myself.
Yeah, and I feel like the interesting part of all of our journeys is that the thing that really shook us as a family was the amount of trauma that we went through in such a short amount of time, you know, because it was like mom and dad separated, then they got a divorce, then our grandmother died, and then mom got breast cancer. Then after that, I stopped, you know, I made like some really intense life choices that caused a lot of waves within the family. And then quickly following that, it was like dad passed away unexpectedly. So it was like trauma after trauma after trauma. And then the things that are happening in our own personal lives, all of them were just like this consistent challenge for us to go within, because I think that just like what you said, Ab, healing relationships is always healing the relationship with yourself. That when you are focusing on the person, it becomes frustrating because then it becomes, how do I get you to change so that you can placate who I am? Instead of just saying, how do I look within so that I can accept and love me and be okay with me? And then I feel like healing naturally happens then on the outside, on the relationships that matter. That's just been my experience. And I want to talk further about some strategies that you guys have used or that you've heard that other people have used to kind of move through this if you are holding on to bitterness or anger. And I want to reiterate something. We had and still have fantastic parents who raised us in a beautiful way, beautiful human beings. And I want to make sure that we are saying that, because we didn't grow up in an abusive environment, and you know, there wasn't like a bunch of crazy stuff, but we are a family just like you lived in a family with human beings that did very human things. But no matter your level of hurt, no matter how you've grown up, at some point someone is going to hurt you. And a lot of times it is our family. So we're going to share some of the strategies that you can use to help you move through this, because as we talked about at the beginning, like, this isn't just like a mental thing. This is this will impact your body. It'll impact how you raise your kids, the environment. Because a lot of times the trauma that we place on other people is just based on the trauma that we've gone through. So one of the things that I have done is I have written undeliverable and deliverable letters. So I remember when this was probably about 2 months in after mom and dad got divorced, and I decided to write my dad a letter. And it was just kind of like a brain dump type of letter. This is how I am feeling. And I just free flowed. And it was things that I had never told him before, emotions that I had had. And I ended up sending him the letter. And it became a conversation piece. And some of the things I wrote, it was the most amazing thing is that we were able to talk through those things because I was able to see his perspective on how I experienced it. And the great part was that he didn't minimize what I had written. Like it was a really great conversation. I've also done undeliverable letters. Now, the reason why some of the letters that I write are undeliverable is because I don't believe that everybody deserves your vulnerability. So there's been relationships that I've had that were really important relationships, and they fell through the cracks, and I was hurt and I was devastated, but I don't seek to repair those relationships, and I don't seek to have those relationships in my life anymore. But I still wanted to get out those emotions that I had about it because they were significant. So I would write undeliverable letters, and I just keep them in my journal as a way to release, because writing helps me. Writing is really a way that helps me and gets some of the emotions out of me without the words staying inside of me. And plus, it kind of feels like I'm talking to them without being able to talk to them. So that has helped me.
I do something similar. Well, I did something similar that actually was not helpful. So I will start with the not helpful and move to the helpful. And similar to an undeliverable letter, is I would literally scream at people in my head. Like I would imagine myself talking to, say, Abigail, since she likes to use me as her example for all the mean things that happened to her life.
That's a little excessive right there.
Like in my brain, in my mind, I would just yell at her and get all of my anger out. And I would think, well, not only do I get to say everything that I feel like I need to say to her, but I don't have to say it to her face, so I don't, make the situation worse. I've done it if I've met you before and you've ever made me angry, which is a pretty safe bet, it's probably happened. But I mean, what you're really doing in that scenario, like that might help a little bit, but it's more of a scratching the itch type of scenario, to where it might make you feel better for a second or two. But really what I have found much more healing is to just humble yourself and actually have that really tough conversation with someone. Even if maybe their feelings will get hurt if I bring this to them or whatever, at least you are there. And a lot of times they will respect the fact that you respect them enough to come to them with it and say, listen, I don't want to hold this against you. I don't want you to hold anything against me. So let's just have this talk. But I have also found that I cannot approach people, especially like if we're talking about someone who's made me angry and I want to have a conversation with them. I need to be calm first. Like if I'm going in my head over and over, like why I'm upset and why I'm going to talk to this person, I can come off a bit confrontational, to where I'm talking in a way that already makes them like put their guard up, because in my tone, I'm either angry or I'm saying things in ways that seem confrontational. And I still struggle with this. I still struggle with my temper. It just happened at work this past week. And I came at it the absolute wrong way. And of course, I felt terrible about it. Not 10 minutes later, I ended up going up and apologizing to him. And I said, I should have talked to you man to man and not exploded like that. But I'm human. But that's really the important thing, is that even if something like that happens where you're not able to calm down or have that healing conversation at first, to eventually just humble yourself and know that the only way to completely heal is if you have those conversations.
Yeah, and I think that this one is probably a super difficult one for people because some people avoid, like people who avoid confrontations, or people who feel like this what's really hard. It is really hard. Like, it's hard to have difficult conversations, even if it's someone that you're close to, or like they're probably going to respect it. It's still hard, but it is not as hard as taking that offense and minimizing it and then letting it stew. Because I think a lot of times the things that we think, it's like, oh, if I avoid it, it'll go away. But it doesn't. It just stews and then it grows. And I think for me, one of the keys to doing like undeliverable letters is at the end of it, I always say, like, right at the end of it, I'm releasing you. I am releasing the power that you have over my mind, my life, my decisions, because that's what happens. When you are holding on to anger and bitterness and what somebody else did to you, it has the potential to control you, to control your body, your mind, your heart, your spirit. So I specifically will say at the end, like, I am releasing you. I am releasing my anger. And of course, this is a process. So it's not like I write it and it's like, like it literally, the light comes down and it leaves me. Sometimes I have to write the letter over and over again or revisit it. But I think just like with the conversation, it is the act of releasing this. It's the act of saying outside of your mouth, that bothered me. And that's a vulnerable place to be, but it's more powerful than shoving it down.
I've actually done kind of a combination of both of those, and I've done them together as well. So I have done some undeliverable letters. I actually did a deliverable one. I mailed it to one of my friends that we had gotten into a huge blowout fight, and she's one of those, like, a hothead. Like, she blows up, and then like 2 days later, she's like, "What? I'm fine. We're best friends again." Whereas me, like, she blew up at me, and it broke my heart. And she came and apologized after, and I tried. I really did. I am being genuine when I tell you I tried to forgive her, and I couldn't. And it was like a couple years later, and it was like all of a sudden, I don't remember what happened, but I started journaling, which I'll talk about in a second. And from that, I started writing her a letter. And as I did that, I released everything, and I was just bawling as I wrote it. And I sent it to her, which I think at this point she was fine, because of course she had exploded and dealt with it 3 days later, 2 years ago. And so it was like that really repaired our relationship, just because I was able to get it off my chest. And I struggle too with, Aaron, like what you said about having conversations when you are emotional, because I feel like when I am in those emotional states, whatever I say, first of all, I feel like I can't get my words straight. And then I'm very afraid that I am going to speak in anger and I'm going to hurt somebody. So, and I don't want to do that, So one time I did write a letter to somebody and I actually read it to them. So it was like I opened up that conversation, that line of communication, and I came to them, and it wasn't a rude letter or anything. It was just basically saying, I was hurt. I'm sorry that I hung on to this for so long. I'm sorry I didn't tell you. And it allowed me to actually open up the conversation without bringing my feelings into it. Another thing that I did, I actually, and I think, Amy, you were the one who told me to do this. And I actually one time journaled, and pretty much what I did is I wrote a list of every single person that I could think of that had hurt my feelings. And I just wrote what they, like, their name and what they did. And as I was writing it, and I am telling you, I don't know if I have ever cried as hard in my life as I cried when I wrote this journal. And I went back all the way to as far back as I could remember, which I'll share the story with you guys. I've told you the story before. So one of them, because, we all have issues with our parents. So one of them I wrote about Dad. And this was from when I think I was 4 years old. It was at our cousin Jimmy's birthday party. And Dad would always dress up. You guys remember he would dress up as a clown and he would do magic tricks. And I remember, he would go and he did I can't even remember what the trick was, but he had somebody that would come up and be like his assistant or something. Who wants to be, who's my next volunteer? And I would raise my hand and I was like, me, Dad, me. And he didn't pick me and he picked everybody else. And I know as an adult, he was doing it because he didn't want to single me out. He wanted to do the other kids and didn't want to show me favoritism. But I remember going up to Mom after that and saying, he didn't pick me. And as I'm writing this down as like a 34-year-old woman, and I am writing about how my dad didn't pick me for the magic trick, and I am bawling. Because at that moment, I'm not that 34-year-old woman. I am that 4-year-old girl who is devastated because her dad is telling her, I don't choose you. And as I was writing it down, all of my emotions came to the surface and I realized all the stuff that I was holding in. And it was stuff from when I was really young that I had suppressed that I didn't even realize was there. And when I brought it to the surface, I was able to see it. I was able to feel the emotions and I was able to let them go. So I highly recommend that. I mean, be prepared, get yourself a whole lot of tissue because it's going to be a very emotional experience. And you're going to really, it's going to be emotional roller coaster. So it's not going to be easy, but once you're done, it was like a weight was lifted off of my chest.
Yeah. I did something similar in therapy because this is another strategy. This has been super effective for me. I've been in therapy for almost 2 years now. And one of the things that my therapist had me do was go through something called a trauma narrative. And what she did was like block my life out in every 5-year increments. And then from the 5-year increments, I just had to write down memories. And it's just like whatever memory comes, like a good memory, like a bad memory, just write them down. And I remember like as I was thinking of like certain memories with the different age groups, it was like things were coming up that were making me emotional. Because I think this is like the essence of where hurt starts, where like this deep-seated bitterness starts, is that a lot of times we don't even realize how impactful words, events, environments, like we discredit so much in our lives and we have emotions or we have things that are blocking us that we don't even know the origin of, even like beliefs that we have about people. It's like, where did that even come from? So it was like there was value for me in going in therapy and even thinking about my relationship with Dad and Mom and you two, and like my relationships with even my romantic relationships. So much of that was influenced by what I saw when I was in the house or how I saw myself or my relationships. So it was like going into therapy. And I think sometimes people misconstrue therapy and they think you go in, you sit on the couch and the therapist says, you are very messed up. And then she judges you after that. But my experience and the experience that I know a lot of people have had, it's simply like a guide. It's someone who like guides you through conversations that you're having and just like offers a different perspective. And I think from a hurt standpoint, I have healed so much in that environment by just being able to talk through some things and getting a different perspective. And then once I was able to get a different perspective, it became easier for me to let it go and take what I need to, because I believe that there's value in trauma and there's value in hurt because it's helped me grow and become so much more self-aware, and then let go of the roughage, the extra stuff that was just holding me back. So that environment, the therapy environment, has done wonders for me.
Mm-hmm. One other thing that I think is really important and that has helped me specifically is being able to see things from the other person's point of view and the other person's perspective. I love this quote. It's from To Kill a Mockingbird. Atticus Finch says it. And it says, you never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view, until you climb into his skin and walk around in it. I love that quote. It is so beautiful. And it's so true. And I remember this is what really helped me to heal my relationship with Dad. because, you know, we all have these expectations of what we think our dad is supposed to be and who they need to be to us and for us. And I remember it was almost like a realization, and I feel like it was almost like God revealed it to me, or, you know, I felt a peace about it because I started to look at him and think he does not have the ability or the capacity to be the kind of dad that I need him to be, because he came from such a broken and a damaged home. And I mean, in our situation was very mild compared to his environment was awful. So for him to be able to be the dad that I needed him to be, he just couldn't. And, you know, honestly, and on one hand, I could think, well, you know, too bad. He was an adult. He should have gone to therapy. He should have, you know, fixed himself, and then he could have not jacked us all up. But I mean, it was a different time. People weren't, you know, going to therapy or talking about emotions or having these kind of hard conversations. But I think if you do look at somebody else outside of your own point of view, you really see different things, and you see people's messed up backgrounds, or you see their good intentions that are poorly executed. So I think it's just when you take the focus off of yourself and put it onto the other person and try to understand them, it helps you a little bit. It might not erase everything, but it might help you and give you some comfort.
Well, I think kind of just confronting the fact that you even have feelings was actually huge for me, because talking about Dad's childhood, Grandpa was, I mean, he was always nice to me, but he was not a pleasant person. My father's father.
Yes.
He was a very, very old school, just no emotion, be a man. Men don't cry, men don't have feelings. And a lot of people don't ever grow out of that. Like, there's never a moment where you have all of this pent up rage or whatever emotion it is inside of you. And if you don't admit to yourself that you have feelings and stop just saying, I'm a man, I don't get sad. I'm a man, I don't apologize for being a man, you know, or, you know, I'm sure women can do it too. Just completely deny the fact that you're having these feelings just so that you can supposedly comfortably shove them down, but that does not release them, and it does bottle up. So confronting the fact that you have emotions, that you have feelings, is largely important in all of this.
Yeah, and they're valid, because I think, like, from a woman's standpoint, it's like we are emotional, and it's like you're just being emotional has such a negative connotation. You know, like, oh, you're just being emotional.
Right. They used to be like I think they had a psychological or medical disorder, like hysterical woman syndrome. Like, seriously?
Right. And it's just literally that you have emotions. So it's like, from a man's standpoint, it's don't be emotional, right? Like, it is what it is. Let it just fall off your back. You're fine. You know, men don't cry. And then the other side of it is that women cry too much and we're too emotional. So it's like on both ends of the spectrum, there's no ownership of the actual emotion, of saying feelings are like symptoms, right? So it's not essentially the feeling, it's what is being communicated to me under the feeling. So it's not just that I'm crying or that I'm hurt. What's under that? And that's the hard part, right? That's the part where you have to, like, dig deep and, like, actually start to be vulnerable with yourself and vulnerable with other people. And even just going back to that quote you shared, I remember reading something that the Dalai Lama, he was talking about compassion. And he was saying that when you believe you're showing compassion, but you're only showing compassion to people that you like, he said that's not compassion, that's preference. Because it's easy to excuse somebody's humanity that I like. But he said compassion that is shown whether you like someone or you don't, and compassion that's especially shown to someone that has hurt you, is real compassion, because all it is the ability for me to see your humanity and understand that your humanity has caused you to act towards me in a certain way. So, like, and this is like a simple conversation, right? So like if me and you are on the phone, Abigail, and like we start getting fussy with each other, right? I could go into this mode of how dare she get rude, and like get all offended and think that you're just such a terrible person for talking to me that way. Or I can pause for a second and have a moment of compassion and think, okay, I'm calling her. It's around 6 p.m. She's probably been at work all day. It's probably been a stressful day. Maybe she's tired. I know when I'm tired, I talk to people a little bit snippy. Maybe that's why she's talking. So that's compassion. Compassion is the ability, like even from the standpoint of healing my relationship with mom, when I was able to see her as Gail and not just as mom, and see that, wait, Gail has a life outside of being my mother, and she has feelings, and she has things that she experienced while she was being raised, and she's a human being who's just trying to do her best and has done a phenomenal job. It makes it easier for me to give grace and compassion because that's what's being given to me. So I think that's the value of compassion. Abigail, I wanted to just reiterate what you said about expectations, because I think this is really important. There is a quote that says, you are only disappointed at your level of expectations. And that quote has never been proven more than over the last 10 years of my life. Because when you realize that the times that you get upset with people is based on you wanted them to be at this level, and then they perform below that level and you were mad. Or you expected them to be this to you or say this to you and they didn't, so then you were mad. And I think a lot of times it is about adjusting your expectations, even if that adjustment in your eyes seems not fair, right? So like if I have to adjust, I remember when me and you were going through a rough patch and you didn't want to talk to me anymore. And it really hurt my feelings because our relationship was so strained. And every time we got on the phone, we were yelling at each other and it would end in tears. And I remember when...
Not me, I wasn't crying.
Yeah, which was even worse. I was bawling my eyes out and she was just like, yeah, I'm fine. So we had stopped talking. And I mean, it was like for months. And this was going from like, Abigail had been my best friend since we were like 7 years old to like, we weren't talking. I talked to her every day. Like, what is life without her? And I was like, what is this? This is not what a sister is. Like my expectations of a sister are, you call me every day and you ask, because that's what I had set for her, right? But it was like our relationship was going through a transition. So in order for me to stop being hurt and to stop holding her to an expectation that we never really agreed to and realize our relationship was evolving, I had to pull back and say, where we're at right now is where we're at. And her decision to pull back and not want to talk to me every day and not be as close is the expectation I will hold her to. Because if I continue to say, I don't accept that, I need more, but she's not willing to give more, we are forever going to be butting heads. I'm going to keep getting offended and the relationship is going to die. So I had to adjust them. So really understanding that, know what your expectations are of others. And sometimes it's a matter of you having to adjust them, or just get rid of them altogether and don't have those expectations and let people just be who they are and accept them right where they're at and love them right where they're at.
Yeah, one thing that I have always struggled with when I'm holding something against someone is vindication. Like, I am right. Like, you come crawling to me and beg my forgiveness. Otherwise, you're dead to me. Obviously, not to that degree. But one of the biggest healing moments that I had in my life was a couple of months after Dad passed. There was two specific people that I will not name, but I was holding very deep grudges against, like very serious in my heart. I had very deep resentment for these two people. And Mom was telling me many, many times that you need to just forgive. You need to just forgive. It's like, well, it's not that simple. Like, I'm right. Like, you don't have to forgive someone if you're in the right. But and I started praying about it because I couldn't get it out of my mind. And this phrase kept coming into my mind, and it was, do you want to be right, or do you want to be healed? And so finally I said, you know what? I don't care anymore. So I actually called both of these people up and I told them that I apologize to you because I've been holding this against you. The one guy didn't even realize I was upset with him. The whole thing was a misunderstanding, and we laughed about it. We had a very good belly laugh about it. And the other one, like, now thinking about it, it was absurd for me to think that this person would say something malicious to me anyway. Like, there's no maliciousness in anything that he says to me. So it was very healing and freeing to be able to get rid of that. And I would have never gotten rid of that if I was still just hunting for that vindication. But that was one step. Like, to me, that was the beginning. But it wasn't like, all right, I'm healed. Tomorrow, I'll never get upset again, and I'll never have to heal again. It is a step-by-step, grueling at sometimes process, and it takes practice. And what I need to do is not ever let it get to that point again where I just hold on to something for months and months and months, and just holding this resentment that just balls up into my chest, and just start having these tough conversations with people, to start going to people with things like this. Or if I'm noticing someone is acting odd towards me, like, yo, did I do something? Like, what's up? So just to try and stay on top of these things so that it doesn't ever spin out of control is something that needs to be practiced.
And it gets so much more comfortable, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Oh yeah, when you can be open and honest with someone and know that you're being real with someone, absolutely.
So, to your point about practicing, I think that what was really important for us is that we had those difficult conversations over and over, because what we had to realize is, as you both know, we were in our 20s and 30s, and we were emotionally 5 years old. We were still kids because we had been raised in this traumatic environment. We never learned how to express any of our emotions. So then we started to express them and started to have these conversations. Well, in the beginning, it did not go very well, and it was really rough, but we didn't give up on it. We practiced it, and we got better, and we started to grow. And so I think that when you do decide to go on these journeys with other people and decide to have these difficult conversations and decide to heal relationships, you have to be prepared that things might not go smoothly in the beginning, and you're going to have to practice, because as you do, you're going to get better, just like with anything else. And with that, I think it's also important that we take personal responsibility. I know that I had to do this myself, but I mean, we can sit there and talk about all day long about how people have done us wrong, and it's legitimate. Aaron, like you said, you're right. You were right with everything that you said.
Yes, I'm always right. I agree.
I feel that way too. I feel right a lot of times.
Me too.
Yeah, of course. Everybody does. It's a natural feeling to have. And it might be true. You might be right. And some people have been really horrible to you, especially our families, because those are the ones that are closest to us. And those are the ones that we are the most vulnerable with. So because of that, we trust our hearts to these people, and that gives them a potential to break them. So we can't control what other people have done to us, but we do control how we respond to it. So if we are just going to sit there and blame other people all day long, but not take a look at ourselves, it's impossible for us to grow, and it's impossible for us to heal. So I think as a part of a healing journey, it's so important to take personal responsibility and to take ownership of your healing, and not expect, okay, well, if they apologize to me, then I'll be healed and then I'll feel better, and put it on the other person. You have to say, okay, I can't control what they're going to do, And I mean, I don't need their apology. I need to work on myself. I need to deal with all of the emotions that I have myself and take responsibility for me.
Yeah. And I've heard apologies before. You know what I mean? Like people who have hurt me, they say that they're sorry. And I go home and I still feel pretty much the same. You know what I mean? Like apologies are great, but I think a lot of times the things that we think that are going to help that are outside of ourselves, like if this person would just do this, or if they would just say this or act this way, it's always like thinking that the other person's actions are going to heal us, when really the reality is, it doesn't matter how many times somebody says they're sorry, until I deal with the hurt inside of me on my own, by myself, that hurt is still going to remain. It doesn't matter how many times somebody says sorry. And I think that one of the valuable parts about having these difficult conversations, or even just having open conversations with each other, is to listen, to understand before you are understood. And for me, this one, I have to tell this to myself every day, because I'm quick to interrupt people and just be like, okay, well, let me tell you my point of view, because what you're saying doesn't make any sense, or I'm quick to defend myself. I remember, just recently, me and Aaron have had a couple of difficult conversations, and my first response is to come to my defense and say, well, no, that's not right. Even though Aaron is sharing his perceptions of me. So I can't say that that's not right. I'm going to say, listen to your dog interrupting us.
So unruly.
It's his turn. We've already heard from Marley and Max. It is
I
Bro's
know.
turn. Do you not
They've all
away from him?
They've all been featured on the podcast.
Granted, I think Bro has been the loudest.
Yes.
That's very true. But I feel like even though the things that Aaron was saying to me were hard to hear, I needed to hear them, because they were his perceptions of me. They were his perceptions of who I was and the things that I did to him. So instead of me interrupting him, I'm listening to understand so that I can do better in my relationship with him, because it's not a perfect science. We're always evolving. We're always working on us. And sometimes people can communicate to you things about you that you can't see sometimes. So I think listening to understand and just not waiting to respond, just hearing them, no matter how hard it is what they're saying, just listen and take it in. Maybe don't even say anything. Maybe go home and think through it, write through it. And then I think it's valuable to accept the relationship where it's at. Some relationships, they just won't be repaired. Some relationships, maybe the damage has been done and it's not going to be at the level that it used to be. Accept it. Accept that not all relationships are meant to last forever. Specifically in family relationships, accept where your relationship is right now. Like I had to accept the fact that me and Abigail for a good amount of time, there was a definite strain there. And I kept wanting to change it. I kept wanting to make it better instead of just saying, right now, this is where it's at. And even like when I repaired the relationship with my dad, it was like the beauty of that relationship as opposed to what it was before. I accepted it for what it was. I accepted the fact that our conversations were filled with him giving me book summaries and telling me about
you would do that with movies
the
too.
Entire plot of a movie.
It's almost like you have to say, okay, well, I'm definitely not going to read this book now because I know everything that happened.
Right.
You'd be so excited too.
Yeah. And
this
just
is so good.
Accept his quirkiness and accept that like I'm not going to be able to call him up and like talk about potential relationship with guys. Like that wasn't really a comfortable zone for him. That wasn't a daddish thing. So it's like accept where the relationship is at, accept the other person, and just enjoy being in a relationship with them. Enjoy having them in your life at whatever level they're at in your life, and not always having to force it because of what you think it should look like or who you think they should be. And I think Aaron or Abigail, I can't remember which one of you said this. I think you both reiterated this, but the idea that healing and letting go and forgiving is a daily choice. It is a constant. You will come back to it all the time, just like you do with working out, eating healthy, It is something you wake up every day making the decision. Today, I will forgive. Today, I will be quick to forgive. Today, I will be quick to offer compassion, and just make it a daily practice in your daily routine so that you don't hold on to anger or bitterness. As we mentioned at the beginning of the podcast, we have a email address, onemorecookiepod, P-O-D, @gmail.com. Share your stories with us. If you are struggling through forgiveness, or you want to talk it out, or you want further assistance, or if you just have a story of overcoming, tell us. We would love to hear your stories and hear how other people are learning how to heal and how to forgive. Aaron, thank you so much for being on today, and thank you for sharing your wisdom.
All right. I appreciate you having me. And also, everyone, look forward to checking out my podcast coming out in early September, The Other 165.
Such a shameless plug, but we'll feature it. Just kidding.
Hey,
Kidding.
I have no shame, so that's fine.
There you go. Yeah, definitely check out his podcast. We are so excited for him starting this journey.
Thank you.
I feel like he is embarking on a section of spirituality that I think is super ignored and not done enough. So I'm excited for you, Aaron. So proud of you. And obviously you too, Abigail. So thank you so much for joining us for another episode of Just One More Cookie. Make sure that you like, subscribe, share. Also, make sure that you email us at onemorecookiepod, P-O-D, @gmail.com. We look forward to seeing you guys next week on another episode of Just One More Cookie.